everyone. Welcome to another day here on The Revolution. I am your host, Jesse Morris, and I am excited to have my colleague and friend, Aiden Mellman, join me today. Aiden, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jesse. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. So Aiden and I have worked together for almost 4 years now, and he is a marketing and Rev Ops leader. So super excited to have him on the show today, and we're going to get a lot of cool information of just some of his experience and go really in depth on a few topics. He works currently at a software cybersecurity, IT security company called Aiden Technologies. And like he and I have had the fun and privilege of getting to solve some big challenges that most of us that work in this space have to solve day in and day out. But Aiden, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I have a little bit of a unique background. I feel like every time I listen to a podcast, every marketer says that, right? But my background started off a little while back as a television producer. I was traveling the world for about 5 years, documenting and telling stories for networks like Animal Planet, Discovery Channel, National Geographic, BBC. And it was a lot of fun. I cut my teeth telling story for some really, really big shows. But it took a toll on my life. I wanted to kind of settle down and met the right person. And so what I did was I ended up taking what I learned telling stories, for these networks, and documenting these really interesting people, to marketing. Started my own production company for small businesses, creating content. Was lucky enough to get a job, my first, real marketing job, I would say, outside of my own production company, for an e-commerce company. I was hired on as a social media manager when no one really did social media, or there wasn't really a lot of social media managers out there, right? And so I worked in e-commerce. That was a lot of fun. Started, branched off and started working in B2B because I just found a fascination with B2B, and headed up some marketing agencies, doing some B2B strategy. And, Aiden was willing, the CEO of Aiden hired me on as actually the first salesperson, selling before Aiden was even a company. Been building the brand and the company here, from the very beginning was one of the first hires, and here we are. And I just fell in love with IT, cybersecurity, and revenue marketing operations.
That's awesome, man. That's pretty cool how you were able to take this very unique background and for lack of a better word, repurpose it into something else. When you look back at that time in life where you were doing all these amazing, traveling and did you think, when you look at yourself then, would you be like, I could actually see myself in this role now? Were you always drawn to this, Rev Ops, marketing ops side of things? Or do you feel like this is kind of like a newly kindled passion, kind of building on some of your creativity from before?
That's a really good question. So I was always just, loved creativity. I felt kind of out of place in television. I really love the adventure aspect. I got to see some really cool stuff. I've seen the Northern and Southern Lights. I've traveled to places that only media could. I've also, risked my life on multiple occasions to try and get, that story. I kind of, once I got into social media, I wasn't really a big fan of social media. I still am not really, in all transparency, but what I started falling in love with was the data analysis, how to add transparency into what I'm doing to calculate ROI, how to optimize and make things more efficient. And so I would say that, in the beginning, I was always, interested in technology, but my love and passion for technology and software and revenue and marketing really kind of snowballed once I got into that first, e-commerce, social media role. And then it just was no looking back. All of my spare time now, I just enjoy learning new things and mastering my craft.
That's awesome, man. That's cool. When you think about, Rev Ops, and there's some people probably listening to this that are just getting into the space or thinking about it, like, what do you love most? If you had to boil it down, you hit on a couple of things, obviously data and some of the other things, but like, what are some of those really things that you're just like, when you do them, you're like, man, that just gets me so much energy, gets me fired up. Like, what are some of those things?
Oh man, my OCD would get into just the data, right, and just like learning how to tell stories with data. I have to constantly, I have to book focus time, right, where it's like, okay, Aaron, you only have an hour to look into this, or else you're going to spend your entire day trying to solve this one problem and with data, or digging into a solution, and I just get carried away, right? So my biggest thing is just it's the data analysis part. I'm not even I don't have a background in data other than what I've taught myself, and we're in a lucky age of technology where you can just search anything and learn anything on the internet for basically free. And I'm a lifelong learner. So, every Saturday morning before my wife and daughter wake up, I'm like watching YouTube videos and teaching myself something new. Maybe it's about Google Analytics, or, mastering something new in HubSpot, or, finding a new software that's coming out, because, we're all just completely overwhelmed with new technologies that are coming out on a daily basis, which makes it exciting, but also very difficult to be in our role, because, we have to put blinders on sometimes and really kind of identify, well, does it make sense for us to try and implement this process, this new software, or can we make what we have right now do enough of what we need until we maybe get budget, or we have enough of a need to be able to, move to that, the new software. But, I think we all know or understand, the shiny thing is not always the right thing. It's just something to learn and know, and potentially put that into your wheelhouse for when there might be a good time to transition over to it.
It's a good call out. It's funny. I was at an event last night with a bunch of other RevOps leaders, and the topic came up of like, who's using AI tools, because obviously AI is the big buzzword right now, and um, and how are they finding the balance between like, the shiny new object versus value ultimately, right? Like at the end of the day, like as much as you and I like to geek out on tools, it really comes down to how are we generating value for the company. And so have you found any like recently, especially, and this is like a little bit off of what we have been on, but have you found any tools that you're just like, man, this not only is like cool new shiny object, but I actually see how this could really be valuable for companies going, and maybe it's in its infancy, but like, are you starting to glean any insights within that area?
So one thing that I am trying to hold off on, with all these new AI shiny objects and software, is like we're in a revolution where there's all these new small software shops, and the big guys are already building stuff into it, right? And they're going to gobble up all these other smaller softwares, and so they're fun to look at. But what I'm excited to try out, because we're a Microsoft shop here at Aiden, and I've grown to like Microsoft more than I did before. I used to be an Apple guy, but now pretty much everything is Microsoft. But like I'm very excited to try out Copilot. I've been waiting and trying to get people to let me try it out. Get our team to let us try it out, and we're very close to doing that. But like integrating that with the Microsoft environment, I think is going to be really really neat to try out. But you know the image generation that's coming out, I, my the most interesting thing to me about this, all these shiny objects, is that we originally thought we went from automating manual processes like machinery, right, to try and do human work, and thinking that creatives are never going to have an issue and we're always going to have a job, to now AI is doing the creative work that we thought was innate in humans. And I think it's a really interesting transition. And you can't it's but I think we have to focus our mindset in not being afraid of it, and more thinking about how it can enable us to do better work, and do less of the tedious stuff, and kind of help break down the barriers of like, okay, writer's block, or needing to spend a lot of money on design and development, although I still have a lot of respect for those people, but a lot, showing them, hey, this is along the same lines of what I'm looking for. Can you create something similar? And so from my perspective, I'm probably not answering your question completely, but I am excited for the new developments in the software that I'm already using, because everybody is implementing AI. So right now we use HubSpot. They've got something called ChatSpot, and some other new AI that allows you to understand your CRM better, and where the gaps are in your pipeline, or how to paint your buyer persona and ideal customer profile, how to paint a better picture of that based on your current data. Or we're transitioning to something like SalesLoft, which utilizes AI in order to better understand, like, when are the best times to reach out, what kinds of templates, how to write these templates or make it easier to write these templates, and just really building on what we already have. I think is where I'm most excited. I'm really trying to just put the blinders on and be like, okay, like I tried the OpenAI. OpenAI is awesome. I started from the very beginning. I also started using from the very beginning. What was that image generation? Midjourney, which was really neat, and that was really fun to play around with. Midjourney.
Yep.
And then OpenAI just came out with a video creation process, and all their other little all their other little implementations that allow you, or I guess it's plugins that allow you to do more. Yep. So it's really neat to see. Yeah, it's really neat to see how every company is implementing AI versus going after all these other little things that are popping up, and you're just like, wow, I just need to get my work done.
It's funny, man. Like, I think about, before we got on the call here, we were working through obviously a problem with HubSpot. And, when I think about even that problem, like hopefully a year from now, we're able to go into a HubSpot kind of knowledge center, right? And actually like interact with, asking how to do workarounds within software, right? And I think to me, that's actually one of the things I'm most energized by is like, if a software isn't maybe meant to do something exactly what you're trying to solve. But as we all know, like the key in a lot of ways with software is like working within its confines, but sometimes like, for lack of a word, hacking it or, tricking it to do what we want it to do. So I'm super excited to kind of see how, I think I was talking to somebody last night about this, about like kind of the knowledge center side of, and in the development piece. Like, so instead of, you and I having to try to figure out flows that are going to work, it's like, here's what I'm trying to do, software, go do it for us, And so I think it'll be fun to see as these companies continue, as you said, to evolve within AI. It'll be interesting to see how they start actually even doing that type of capability, right?
Without a doubt. So Zapier actually has already implemented that, interestingly enough. Although I try and work within the tech, I think you and I both would agree, like trying to work within the technologies that you're already using so that way you're not making things more complex, which is, part of a Rev Ops issue. Because if you're in operations at all, you want to make things more efficient and you want to work with the tools that you have versus having to spend excess money and then, trying to figure out how to solve problems. You have so many complexities in one type of, process. You're like, man, I don't even know what broke. So you spend so much time trying to solve it versus working within one platform. That's something actually, you've helped me to really focus on, because I still really like Zapier because there are a lot of things that you can do without spending a lot of money. We all know HubSpot can be really expensive depending on what you're trying to implement. But, Zapier can do that, and it's really neat. But I think a lot of these other technologies are catching up to what Zapier is trying to do. And so I think we just have to be a little patient and deal with what we got.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When you think about like some of the big challenges as we go into this year, and even just within Rev Ops marketing, what are some of the big challenges you're trying to solve for right now?
Man, I would say really making a clear connection with return on investment. That our efforts from a marketing standpoint are are working, and then being able to track those all the way through to when we start generating the revenue, right? And that can take a long time can take a lot of work. You and I have been both working on this, a solution for that for Aiden for a long time, and just on other projects. But I think that the biggest challenge, is really making sure to get your team aligned with what your strategies are and what your goals are and what the outcomes are, and building those so it's clear. So, for example, we are putting a lot of work and effort into events. Like, those are really killing it for us. And last year was a huge year for us. We did this event. It was a legal specific event called ILTACon. If anyone is interested in trying to get into legal, especially B2B or whatever it is, I would highly suggest going there. It's a wonderful community. But long story short, myself and our CEO went. We generated something like 30 or 40 new opportunities, right? And it wasn't just the challenge of trying to, get all those opportunities across the line, but it was also a challenge of making sure that we track them. And one beautiful thing about HubSpot, I'm not here to promote HubSpot, I'm not sponsored by HubSpot, but you can see it really helps to see both from the marketing and sales side, all the work that goes in and being able to track attribution, and being able to say, hey, we did ILTACon last year, and it cost us, let's just shoot out a number like, $40K. And we were able to close, $600,000 in business. So you can see that multiple, right? And you can also see all the work that was done by sales teams, et cetera, and be able to really dig in and say, okay, we got 6x return on our investment, right? And be able to immediately say, that was a good decision. Let's make it better for next year. How can we increase our return on investment, decrease our amount of effort, and better track and optimize our entire process, so that way every single time we do that event or any other event, that you have the entire process mapped out and the entire strategy built out, and everybody is on the same page. That's the beauty of what we do, is that if you're able to align all of that, people come back to you and my team will say like, wow, you were able to track all of that. You were able to see all of that. And you're like, yeah. And the next time you say, I want to do that event again, or I want to do this event, or I want to, try this strategy out, they're going to feel confident that you're able to produce that ROI and that you are basing it off of, the knowledge and the systems that you put in place. But it takes a lot to get there, right? Like, I think you and I have just, banged our heads together quite a few times, where we're just like, how do we do this? Or how do we get around this? Or how do we communicate this to the team? How do we get everybody on board? And it's just being persistent and really diving into the details. For example, something that you and I implemented, which were deal source and deal source detail. And this is something that I've communicated to quite a few people, because they have a hard time tracking attribution, right? And so if you look at it, from a high level, deal source is like event, or like webinar, partner, employee, cold outreach, whatever it is. And then deal source detail is like event, ILTACon 2023, event, or webinar, XYZ date, right? And that way you can also replicate that in your campaigns, right? And once you are able to align your campaigns, you can see the marketing effort. And then once you're able to and the lead source and lead source detail, and you have it seamless across and the same. So that way you can see where the lead came from, that they turned into an MQL, then to an SQL or sales accepted lead, whatever your process is, to either a customer or closed loss, and then putting in the pain points and the pain point details of what their problem is, and then also the closed won reason or the closed loss reason, and making sure that your team understands the value of putting those things in there really helps you to not only see where your resources are being spent and where your revenue is coming from and what channels, but also being able to dive in and say, hey, we were able to generate this much revenue from this buyer persona or this ideal customer profile, And where else can we find similar people like this? Or how can we dial in and optimize who we're reaching out to? So for example, one of my quarterly goals for this quarter is to really dive into those details. Look at all of our pain points, and why people are coming to us, and at what stage in their career they are. So did they just join the company, or had they been there for a long time? What level they're at, and then also figuring out like the revenue of the company, which is great because HubSpot automatically creates that, right? And what size, how many employees, at what time of the year did they come in, and seeing and understanding their budgeting cycles, and then being able to put together enough information and data and being able to relay that to our SDRs, our sales reps, as well as our executive leadership, to put everybody focused on, hey guys, this is the data, these are the trends that we're seeing, and here's how to go about reaching them. Here's what we're seeing. Let's continue on this process. Let's continue to get, to work on this strategy, and get more data behind it, and either prove that we're right or figure out how to optimize our process, right? And how to get into these. And then everybody, going behind and in the same strategy to really focus your efforts. And that's one of the beauties of what we do, is being able to not only just identify trends, but then create hypotheses off of these trends and put the entire team behind it and a strategy behind it. And then figuring out where those gaps are and filling those gaps really helps to, grow your company, but also not only grow your company and your revenue, but also grow the trust that your team has in you, and become really that expert that you are. But you also, some people don't always have all of the tools. You got to work with what you got. But I would say that, that kind of strategy and putting that every element in place has really changed the way we do things, right? And that's why we knew, I know the conversion rate from our events. And our conversion rate from events, from our network, our partners, and our advisors, through the roof. Where are we focusing our money and our attention? Referrals and events. And guess what? It's working.
I think it's awesome, man. I think one of the fun things it's been, I've been with you as well from the beginning, right? Before Aiden was actually Aiden. And it's interesting because most companies don't really start thinking about, honestly, data and systems and process till later typically. And I think where Aiden has just done such a phenomenal job is they made a decision early on. I think a lot of it, Josh obviously is a huge proponent of the CEO, of this commitment to it. And I think what's really cool is it's been fun to see the evolution and even just even the ability to have the conversations. But you hit on something really key behind that, and that's the trust with the team. And so it's really easy, I think, in our roles to sit here and be like, okay, we're going to put all these data fields in, and we're going to hopefully create good business process. And hopefully, fingers crossed, the reps actually fill in data, which everybody who's listening to this that knows, works in this area knows that can be painful. I think something that you have done a phenomenal job working with your leadership team on is actually showing them how is the information being used and being help driving the company forward, right? So it's not just this accountability thing or black box, or we're being difficult people to make you input information, sales rep, into the system. But actually, here's the impacts that we see it driving forward. Because at the end of the day, I think the one common ground you can find across a company, hopefully, is everybody's desire to win. And a lot of that obviously is helping your customers and your prospects win. And I think that's something that it's been cool to see Aiden leverage the data, really the information. And I think the reps pick up on it, right? They see okay, I don't love inputting all this information, but I do see the value that it gets us back, which is more pipeline, ultimately at the end of the day. And I think, it's cool to see too, how, you guys have focused your marketing efforts. I think a lot of these companies out there it's the spray and pray mentality. And even ads, you and I talked about ads early on, and And I think, that's a hard one for a lot of companies to kind of let go of, but you clearly see in your data where, and it's not to say you completely walk away from strategies, but you're making your biggest bets in the areas that you're getting your biggest ROI. And I think that's the thing that I think is so powerful about what we get to do day in and day out is it's not systems for system's sake or data for data's sake. It's actually all focused around driving the most value for the company. And I think you guys have done just such an exceptional job at that. So that's awesome.
I mean, you've been a huge help the entire time, right? Like, I mean, you've helped us implement all of these data, all of the data, cleaning up our data, getting our dashboards together, really creating and painting this story behind the data to the rest of our team. So, I couldn't have done it without you. I think one thing that you did hit on that I would probably expand on just a little bit is that educational side. And so we only do ads to invite people to events on LinkedIn. We have not done any other kind of advertising, spent any other advertising other than, although granted, there are some uses for advertising, as far as, how many touches we have and during the pipeline, when a deal is in pipeline, to be top of mind, right? And to remind people that who we are and whatever it is. But where it all started, and I'm not against ads either, by the way.
For sure, yeah.
But I think there's a time and a place for that in every company. And I think that a lot of companies tend to jump to ads as the end all be all too fast versus, like, we're an IT cybersecurity company. And we provide solutions for, CTOs, CIOs, and soon to be CISOs. And understanding who you're trying to not only provide, you're trying to provide value both internally, but also externally, right? Because I don't want to waste someone's time. And if I'm hitting somebody with ads that's a CIO, CTO, or CISO, they already don't trust marketers. They don't trust salespeople. And so I had to figure out a way to get in front of them without barraging them with all of these, without all of these ads, because none of them pay attention to it. I could easily go and do Google Ads and test out my messaging and see if they convert. And I'll tell you, I've done a lot of ads in the past, and not only are there a lot of people that are doing it, and I think it's a lot more expensive than it used to be, but if you've got a good product, you focus on your network. And for us, like that was the key for us, is talking to our customers or talking to like-minded people that we want to buy, want to be a partner with us and our or a customer, and really saying, hey, why would you go with something like us? Like, where would you find, like, for example, like we were a no-name company, 3 years ago. Like, where would you go to find new information about a company? What do you trust? Who do you trust to tell you these things, right? Gartner, Forrester, or maybe it's just, mostly network and who their fellow CIOs, CTOs, CISOs are. That was the value there for us. And so once we got that information, that kind of started to dictate started to help us to create these strategies, right? And then we had, or hypotheses, really. And once we started testing out a bunch of hypotheses, then we started building strategies around them, and we started making sure that we could track it the entire time. And then we just started, optimizing and scaling those because we started to see some traction, right? I mean, we're testing out, cold outreach. We're seeing a little bit of traction, but granted, we're just getting set up on that. I still think it could be valuable because some of our early customers came from that. But, and also working on the messaging that works, right? Like, these guys don't want to be sold to. It's just like, hey, XYZ is already using this, go ahead and talk to them. They love us, and let them, do the educational type of piece first and learn about who we are. And then we can go back and say, hey, we heard you talk to them. Why don't you go ahead and test drive a little bit of what we're doing? And that's not for every company. It's very unique. Not very unique, but it's not necessarily for every company. And you just have to understand and make sure that it's the right strategy for you. And that all starts with your customers, right? Where does revenue come? your customers. You can't force people to buy things. You have to make sure that you're approaching it the right way, because I also personally can't stand someone in my face all the time with sales and marketing stuff. I literally will just mark them spam. And that's not our goal, I think, as marketers and Rev Ops people. I can't see it that way.
No, and I completely agree. I think it's a really valid point of, it's like go to where your customers are, like meet them where they're at. And I think that's really, really insightful and something you guys have done really well. I want to talk a little bit about events, because, events are interesting. Like if you talk to, I mean, if you talk to 10 SaaS companies, 8 of them would be like, we only go to events for branding. Like if they really boiled it down, like we go to events because, by not being there, it communicates something in the marketplace, and it's good networking for our, our peer or fellow potential referral partners, and even maybe existing customers. But most of them, I think, would say that they aren't seeing the ROI or value from events. I think obviously you guys have done complete opposite, where a lot of your focus and energy is on events. Like I think it would be really helpful for us to go in detail around, like, what are some of the things that you guys are doing that is making these events so successful? Like what are some of those things that you make you stand out, that are driving? We talked about, even this year, you got a really good year, but you're like, hey, there's some things we can do even next year. What are some of those things that make you stand out and really drive ROI for events?
So my first suggestion for any event, because as we all know, they can be very expensive and be great or a flop. And I was just listening to a podcast where they were talking a lot of trash about events, and kind of came off with like, oh, it's just branding and you're not going to get any leads from it and all this other BS. And it was really unfortunate that they were talking like that, because it just means you didn't have a really good strategy in place. And you didn't pick potentially the right event for you. And so for us, something that has been ingrained in my mind is bullets, not cannonballs, or bullets, then cannonballs. So you shoot a bullet. So a small investment. All right. So let's just go and see what this event is all about. And listen and talk to other people that have done this event, and see what their strategy has been, right? Like we're not always first movers. And with the amount of budget that we don't have really, we can't be first movers. So we can't go and spend a ton of money on, some booth and spend, $100,000 and we get lost in the sauce. Unless you can invest in that, you really just get lost in it. You just become part of the sea of people and part of the noise instead of, a signal. So what we've done, I actually had our events and content specialists create like a decision tree. And the decision tree is based on like, okay, things like, where's the location? Do we have a sales rep in that location? Because that will decrease your costs. Or is there a good saturation of the type of industry, the companies in the industry that you're looking for? And one thing that we're really focusing on is industry first. And so like right now, we've really broken into financial services and law firms. They work really well for us because they really love what we do. And so then we start researching the different events, but we shot a couple bullets last year of like super in-person, intimate events where like it was only one and maybe one other vendor. We paid for dinner at a really nice place. It wasn't very salesy, and we just wanted to see if that would work for us. It might not work for everybody. And you had said something like, about SaaS, and I think it also depends on your strategy. We're actually a solution. So we have a service and a software. And on top of that, our ticket, we're at about high 5 to 6 figure ticket item, right? Very white glove. And because of that, one solid event, one solid dinner, you spend $3,000 to $5,000 on a really nice steak and really quality conversations with your target audience, and you get one deal out of that. You make your money back right there. Not to mention, you leave a good impression, and they're going to go tell their friends, and they're going to go tell their employees or their team members, say, hey, I want you to go check this out. It looks super interesting. one other piece of value that we found is being able to actually demo our solution, because previously we weren't demoing our solution until we got some legalities in place. But long story short, like, we really want to be focused on the tip of the spear and figure out where those intimate conversations can be had. So even at these big events, where people have booths, like, we'll have a suite where we go and set up in-person meetings, and we schedule these meetings ahead of time for anyone, real face-to-face quality. Hey, here's you want to make sure that you control the entire experience, but like, we get events as marketers thrown at us all the time. Hey, go check out this event. We'd love for you to come. Or, hey, there's a speed dating event. You get 5 minutes with 30, C-suite executives. And you're like, okay, well, how quality of a conversation can you really have? Versus, hey, let's be a member of a industry type of high quality community, and let's go talk to these people, really ask what their problems are and what they're trying to solve, and not necessarily talk about our solution, but talk about the problem. And then once you can talk about the problem, then you can start saying, oh, well, that's interesting. Like, we've seen so-and-so solve that problem. And, I don't want to be too salesy, but they actually solved it with our solution. Would you mind checking it out? And you're relating to them, right? And I guess I might be getting a little too off topic, but part of what we're doing is we're shooting bullets, not cannonballs, figuring out and learning from our peers what's worked and what's not. I'm doing regular conversations, just like what we're having with, like, before I go to an event, I will talk to about 3 or 4 other people and say, hey, have you gone to this event? What did you do that worked? What did you do that didn't work? Oh, you've never been? Okay, would you like to go in and co-sponsor something? And let's both, spend a little bit of money and do a partnership that will benefit us both, right? But it's very industries focused. We're not going to these big box events. We know that our buyer persona is going to be there. We know that it's focused on our ideal customer profile. It's generally very location based and in a place where it's very saturated. So like, New York or LA or San Francisco, or, Texas is a budding technology environment. And making sure that then we have a solid strategy leading up. What I mean by that is, like, for Ilticon, the first thing, what we did was we actually had a customer case study webinar before the event, and we advertised for it, right? Said, hey, we're going to Ilticon, but guess what? We've got an Ilta member, and they're going to tell you why we're so great. We're not going to sit here and tell you why we're so great. They're going to tell you why we're so great and how they used us to solve a specific pain point. And then we're going to do a demo. And then, hey, guess what? Why don't you go ahead and meet us at Ilticon? Let's continue the conversation. Let's answer any questions that you have, right? It's for us, because we're doing B2B, small to medium-sized enterprise. You really kind of have to, it's not a, freemium type of service right now. Or a product. We're not, you can't just go online, sign up and test it out. You really have to kind of convince someone to spend, 6, maybe even 7 figures on a solution. And it takes a lot of just answering all of their questions, getting your customers to speak on your behalf, bringing your customers to events, and having them, do any kind of, conversation or being on a panel talking about the pain point that you're solving surrounding it. But we did that webinar beforehand, and I can't tell you how many people came by our booth that knew us, and we were in a small corner that no one should have ever came by, but we hustled our butt and generated something like 40 opportunities and over probably $5 or $6 million in opportunity, and I think about 10%, 15% of that closed. That made our year, and we're about to close a couple more, and then the follow up. We also then had a customer case study webinar afterwards too, to keep top of mind. And we went to another event to meet any of those prospects that were close to closing but hadn't yet. Brought a customer of ours, and continue to talk with them, right? And just being top of mind, having a full-fledged strategy where you have, a month or two in advance to not just strategize, but build up momentum. We did a press release, and then we executed on the event with a bunch of, just getting people to come by, telling people who we are, educating people, and then the follow-up of, because once the event happens, your job's not done. You have to get these people to continue to talk to you, right? Depending on where you are in the buying cycle. And it was just that was the kind of strategy that worked very well for us. And that's the same kind of thing that we're doing with these in-person events, but not as heavy marketing and not enough. So like we'll bring a customer to this in-person event, these dinners. And I tell my team and I both see it as like, okay, this is not for us to sell Aiden. This is for our customer to sell Aiden. We're just here to answer questions about Aiden, right? And have a nice dinner, and then follow up with them afterwards, and not just try and sell to them, because they're there for a nice dinner, they're there for a nice experience, and you leave that lasting impression. So it depends on what type of event, but from my perspective and who we're trying to target, it's not about marketing and selling the hell out of it. It's about creating these conversations and having someone else speak on your behalf, I think, is the highest quality that we've found and that we've seen. And it's really helped not only to generate revenue, but build our brand.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's a couple of themes that I want to pull out from what you just said. One is buyer personas and really knowing your audience, right? And I think that's something that everybody talks about. There are very few companies that are really good at that. One of my clients is 20-year old SaaS company, and if you ask them their ICP, they'd send you like 7-page document that's been sitting there and it's got a lot of dust on it, and it's really not focused. But what I love what you said is you named 2 industries. You said it's not to say those are your only 2, but you're laser focused on financial services and legal. And that maniacal focus, man, it's just game changing. And that's what you're seeing here. And so I want to highlight that. I think that's something that is really good call out, is you're not just going to, I'm making this up, a Salesforce, Salesforce's big annual event. Like, no, you're not putting money there. You're going to where your best ideal customer, ICPs are, right? And I think that's really been instrumental. The second thing that you mentioned, and it's really interesting. Like you said it here about like, hey, we're not really there to sell. But what you are doing really well is you're running it as a whole process. And so, I think a lot of people think like, okay, the event's in 2 months. We'll all just show up and hopefully we'll meet people there and we're going to get aggressive. No, like you guys are sitting, way before the event begins. You're back here going, okay, let's get engagement and drive engagement before we even get there. And then that momentum is built. So you're going into the event already with momentum. You're not like showing up the event and hoping the event's going to produce. You're like creating your own destiny, to like say that kind of cheesy, but you're really creating that momentum going in, which actually does a couple things. Like one, obviously it drives more traffic. So when you actually get to the event, and more traffic, interestingly enough, drives more traffic, right? Like if people see that there's a lot of people there, that also helps. And to your point, people know other people in the industry. And so if they're like, hey, I'm meeting with this company called Aiden, you should too, that generates more buzz. And then the last thing you said, which is so crucial, and it's the thing that absolutely, I think, crushes most events. And I've seen this, and you've seen this. You and I have talked about this 100 million times. It's the follow-up. It's the post-event follow-up. And that is amazing to me, how many companies do not execute well on that and how quickly you need to be on top of it. It can't be like, we went to the event, last week, we'll do follow-up next week. Like that's 2 weeks. Everybody has moved on. They've forgotten about things. And so the time frame too, and I think the way you guys have laid that out is just this like strategic process, and then executing well on it. It's less about how you sell and, how you position it and your pricing, packaging, and your discount incentive for the event. Like I didn't hear you mention any of that. What I heard you mention is driving a momentum, focusing on knowing where you win business, and then really making sure that everybody in the company and the team is marching to the same beat and focused on execution, which is so cool to hear.
One it's funny, you just reminded me of a good learning experience that we did have. So not everything is perfect, right? Not everything works well, and it's not all roses. One thing that we did learn, so we did create an offer, and the offer was like overwhelmed our sales team and our customer success, and which is a good problem to have. But part of it, we created such a good offer, but we also didn't we weren't like our ideal customer profile. We didn't. We were trying to create an offering for a ICP that it turned out wasn't as ideal as we had hoped. Right. So we had discounted too much, or we took too much, too much, like we offered too much. Right. And ended up, eating our lunch a little bit. But it was a good learning experience, because I think you really have to, don't be afraid to make mistakes, but also, create these offers that say, hey, listen, you come by our booth, you schedule a meeting with us. Not like, oh, here's a $50 gift card. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something that's actually going to change, de-risk going with your solution, especially if you're a smaller name, and making it easy for them to make the decision, budgeting, outcome, what have you, and making these we have a 90-day money back guarantee, right? And promoting the heck out of that, de-risking it because, we're not a household name just quite yet, and making sure that that's part of your offer. Raffles are nice, but I've never really seen those pay off. They're just, a nice little thing to try and generate some names, but how many people, how many raffles they enter into, especially if it's one of these bigger events, it could be hundreds. How are you going to stick out versus, hey, we can solve your problem, totally de-risk your decision, and if you follow up within a certain amount of time, or I'm going to have someone follow up, you frame it and you let them know what's to come. It's like, or even better, let's schedule some time while we're at the event, or a day or two after, schedule it right then and there, and lock them in for that. Because people that, even if they have to reschedule that meeting, you're still on their calendar, right? You still have their information. You still make an impression versus let's raffle off an iPad or, a whatever you want to call it. And people have enough stuff, right? But you're there to try and solve their problem. And you're there to make a change in their career, ideally. Because if you paint them as, if you help them to, if you put an impression, you make an impression, you build up that feeling, a lasting thought in their mind, like, man, I really enjoyed talking to that person, or man, it sounds like they could really solve this problem. And that would change the way that my job, like I would be promoted, right? Or I could not deal with this headache, or my team wouldn't have to deal with this anymore, or I could save a ton of money, whatever it is, or we wouldn't get hacked, whatever it is. That's way more of an important feeling and offer than offering them something that, they're probably going to give to their kid. It gets them to come by, but you need to leave a lasting impression, and don't just focus on trying to generate, get emails and phone numbers, because, that's one thing that I think marketers try and do too much is like, oh, we got like 100 leads from this event. Like, okay, well, what's the quality? Who did you have quality conversations with? What is their interest level? I put interest level in HubSpot because I wanted to be able to understand what their interest level is and send the hot leads off to, our sales reps or SDR, whoever it is, follow up right away. And that way they also have the frame of mind of what they have to approach how they have to approach the conversation. Right. So I think that part of the strategy is really important as well. And you really kind of have to think, and that comes back to understanding who you're selling to and who's going to be there, right? Are you going to try and raffle off, a $500 tchotchke when someone else, maybe across the aisle is raffling off a vacation somewhere? You're going to get into this competitive, cycle that just never really ends. versus people reacting off of emotion. And that's what I think we get lost, getting lost in the data or lost. We also tend to sometimes forget that behind that data are real people, right? And so that's just something that we've learned, not to create an offer that matters, create an offer that, you can learn from. It might not always be financially feasible, but if they're interested in that offer, then maybe you can just optimize and make the offer better next time, right? But getting your foot in the door, getting a lasting impression, making people happy, so that way they talk about you is really that end goal that I'm constantly looking for when I'm looking at an event.
I think it's a good point, man. I was at an event last night, and it was it was a company I really like, but it wasn't overly well executed. It was kind of, you could tell, a last minute thrown together thing, and the thing they gave at the end was this. I'm gonna knock it a little bit, and they'll probably give me a hard time for this, but like, they gave us a little goodie bag that had a really cheap bottle of wine and a book. And nothing wrong with that, but like, it's more to your point, it's more stuff. I don't need more stuff. It's like more clutter to put in my house. What I was really hoping for, and it's funny, they actually they said this great question in the thing last night of like, hey, what's one problem you're struggling with? So I shared like one big challenge that I'm working through, and like nobody ever circled back around on it. It's to your point, like, I didn't need any free. I didn't need more stuff. I went because I wanted to solve a problem. And my time is actually the most valuable thing anyways, right? At the end of the day, like, no iPad or anything else makes up for my time, right? And all of us are the same way. All of our time is really valuable. And so it is interesting when you talk about, like, by adding value, true value, you're actually giving people time back, and respecting their time versus, more stuff. So I think it's a very apt point you're looking through. So thanks for walking through that. Kind of in wrapping up our time here, and it's been awesome walking through this. I really appreciate you going into all the detail. I think the event stuff I think a lot of companies struggle with that area. So I think, some of these insights today are going to be really helpful. I'd love for you just, as in closing remarks here, for people that are wanting either newer to Rev Ops, marketing ops, or wanting to get into it. Looking at your career trajectory, it wasn't a straight, like, I think it's funny, like, even with my career, like, both of us, like, we don't come from a traditional, background, if you will, for this. You were in TV, and I was in sales. So I guess I had a little bit of a sales background, but, I also did finance for a while. So there's not like this straight trajectory. What would be some advice you would give to a younger you, or somebody not even younger, but just somebody who's newer into this space, of how they can really make an impact and grow their career?
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to fail, and do everything you can to understand what the outcome you are looking to get is. If you aren't afraid to fail, you aren't afraid to try new things, right? Of course, you have to frame that. Like, if you're telling someone, "Oh, I'm going to ace this first," and you're first of all probably creating too much confidence. But as long as you're focused on the value and the outcome of learning, right? You might hit the ball out of the park, or you might, hit a grounder, or might strike out, but at least you take that and you learn from it, and it goes into your next learning, right? And that's something, I tell my teammates all the time. They're like, "Man, I don't feel like I'm doing very good at what I'm doing right now." It's like, well, what are you getting out of it? The value. What are you learning from it, right? And then going and trying to master your craft, or learn how to do it better next time, right? And then I think too many people are just too afraid to ask questions because they want to be viewed as someone who knows all the answers. And it's really hard to, swallow your pride. And if you're a lifelong learner, that means you're constantly trying to learn new things. If you're constantly learning new things, it means you don't have all the answers. And so, making sure that And I guess the last one would just be making sure that you clarify, right? Like if you're talking to your leaders or your C-suite, your CEO, whoever it is, or even your team, and you're like, hey, we're going to test this out. We don't know if it's going to be successful, but part of it is marketing is testing things out and trying out new things and optimizing and then scaling, right? I mean, that's the idea, and it's a creative process, and it's great. But I think you just have to make sure that you're humble, you ask questions, and you try and maximize your time and value that you're providing. And I think that those things, if I would have known earlier on, don't try and climb up the ladder too fast either. I think that's something that a lot of us try and do because we're so obsessed with the title bump. Whereas like, I'm the head of marketing or director or whatever you want to call it, but really I am learning something new every single day, from everybody that I work with. And it brings a new joy in life that makes you excited to get up the next day and really do your job. So
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I love the value. You kind of see like one of your themes, I think, throughout our conversation today is like, focusing on really, driving value and learning. Like those have kind of been, central for you, and it's been fun to see, you apply that each day, and even our conversations before this, like both of us are in that always learning stage of there's probably better ways to do things, and that openness, right, to be wrong and to put it out there, I think is really impactful. So really appreciate you joining today. For those of you, please follow Aaron on LinkedIn. Click the subscribe button to the podcast. But thank you all for joining. And Aaron, thanks for having joined us today.
This has been a lot of fun. Thanks, Jesse. Take it easy.